This is TWiT.
Jean-Louis Gasset, I always read his Monday Note, former Apple president. He was head of Apple Europe for a while, then did BOS, and I still think he's a pretty astute Apple observer. Did some interesting kind of thought experiments on what will Apple look like in 10 years. He starts with kind of some misdirection, saying, who will be Tim Cook's successor? He actually likes Jeff Williams, even though Jeff's only a few years, 2 years younger than Cook, but
like 2 feet taller.
He is taller, and that's really matters. But no,
yes.
The reason he likes Jeff Williams is interesting because he says, can the next 10 years for Apple bring the same growth? We know trees don't grow to the sky, but what market would Apple grow in? He says, we'll dismiss cars right away, even though Apple continues to hire Tesla engineers and spend lots of money on cars. He says, to be sure, a few million Apple cars at 50K would make the auto industry a mother lode for Apple, as it has for Tesla. But I don't think it'll happen.
It's automation.
Yeah.
Like it's a whole bunch of automation products.
He says Apple's a high-margin company. The car business yields low margins. He says autopilot.
Yeah, but the problem with that argument is the phone business is a low-margin
Well, that's
business.
true. You can transform it. They transformed it. That's right. Yep.
You don't have to. You just got to play a different game.
Autopilot technology, he said, is kind of stuck at level 2 without much hope of getting level 5 in the foreseeable future. That's been a little bit of a disappointment to a lot of people, including
I think one of the
Tesla
problems
owners.
with that is that people are. I mean, highways are very doable. It's the side roads that are problematic.
Yeah.
And most of us, what we would love to do is be able to get on the highway and then not have to think about this for a while.
Well, you can almost do that already. I mean, honestly, most
you can do it already.
Most of the ADAS, the assist,
you're not supposed to.
does it. Well, you keep your hands on the wheel. My Ford Mach-E, I keep my hands on the wheel, but it's doing adaptive cruise control. It's checking lanes.
Right.
It's keeping in the lane. It's doing mostly what you want to do in a highway situation for sure. And my Tesla did the same. He says augmented reality. Hold on. Is often cited as having the potential to change the tech industry. It's more realistic than cars. And while Facebook is pushing the metaverse, he says AR has no, don't yell at him, no broad use case that Apple could seize upon to launch a new wave of growth. Yeah, it might be wrong. I do agree. I may not agree completely with those points, but I do agree with what he finally comes down to, which is healthcare. He says Apple... if you're looking for an industry where there is lots of room to grow and a lot of money to make, even in non-invasive blood glucose monitoring, we're talking perhaps $1 trillion business.
And Tim Cook said that out loud, right? He said Apple's going to be best known for their health initiatives.
Yeah, it fits in kind of with what Apple has. Apple's kind of heart, and also, and Gasset comes full circle by saying, by the way, the senior Apple executive who drives the company's health initiatives is Jeff Williams. So that would make sense. Maybe Apple could do cars and could do AR and could do health. Who knows? Do they have to pick one?
No.
I think that the big
vision.
Yeah.
I think that with all three of them, what we're seeing Apple do is very, very slow and massive rollouts. So health is being slowly added into our watches, and the process is this giant move. With cars, whatever Apple's going to do with cars, they have a team working on it. So they're doing something, and it's just like this big kind of slow move. And the same thing with AR. AR, they've been building up for the last 5 years. So there's talking about it when they need to. I think most of the time when Tim Cook's talking about it a lot, it's because they're trying to make deals with the people that quietly make deals with folks and say, yeah, this is important to us. See what Tim just said?
That's interesting. That makes sense. Yeah. Because he was saying AR a lot the last few years, right?
When they were trying, my guess is that they're trying to, well, not acquire AR companies, but try to get companies to adopt. It takes a long time to build the pipeline this is what Facebook isn't doing very well. It's what Google really painfully failed. I mean, because they were way ahead. Like I worked with those phones, we were shipping those phones, shipping those phones in from China because they wouldn't put them on their own phones with LiDAR and everything else. And so it was, Google was way ahead. They just didn't build the acquisition tools, And so what Apple's doing with reality converter and creator, and with object capture, and with slowly rolling USDZ out. You're building an entire ecosystem before you roll AR out, and that's I think that's why they're adding AR to every little bit of things to keep on seeding the ideas. So I think that it's probably still a little ways out, but it's going to be bigger than the phone if they do it right.
Yeah, it's still speculative. I do think that AR is in the same category as level 5, maybe even level 4 autonomous driving. It'll almost certainly happen. It'll certainly happen within our lifetimes. Beyond that, I'm not willing to speculate, because there are just so many roadblocks that have to be solved, and not all of them can be solved with engineering and technology. A lot of it is going to be cultural, and a lot of it is going to have to be wait and see what people want and try to steer them to a place where they can want something better.
Well, a lot of these things are just out of your reach anyway. I mean, non-invasive glucose monitoring has been promised and not delivered for years, and if you could get that, there's a massive market of type.
Apple keeps buying companies that keep saying they're a year away, and Apple's like, we're a year away, you're a year away, we keep buying you, you're always a year away.
We've named 3 things that we're this close to reaching. We can't quite.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of technologies that are a engineering example of Zeno's paradox, where you can get halfway towards the finish line 1,000,000 times, but as always, the remaining distance, even if when it becomes half a millimeter, that is the most difficult half a millimeter you will ever have to travel. And Rene also pointed out something that is also going to be a challenge, not only for Apple but for everybody else. A lot of tech companies in a lot of different esoteric markets, they are actually very, very thrilled to be bought out by Google. They're very, very thrilled to become part of Apple, to get the sort of resources where they don't have to productize this technology. They have to simply integrate it, and they have people who can pump so much money into their research that they can actually get it going. But the question is, will the U.S. allow large companies to buy these small companies as easily in the future as they have in the past? Because I do agree with the supposition that health, far beyond what Apple's doing right now, is such a huge opportunity for them, and it's such a great. They're in such a great position to really take advantage of it.
They may get health for free with the watch. It's just a matter of.
Well, I'm thinking about. Imagine Theranos, but it works.
Yeah.
Like imagine. I'm not talking about like
not criminal,
not a blood drop. But I'm talking about what if they made it a priority, saying there must be a way that we can put diagnostic tools in the hands of make
it's
diagnostic
tools
that cost thousands of dollars. And,
the tricorder.
Yeah.
I mean, the watch could end up being a tricorder. When? We don't know. The cars could drive themselves. When? Soon. But we don't know.
I was talking to someone who's working on a technology that I don't think is secret. I mean, they didn't have me say to be secret. That you can take your iPhone and actually point it at your eye, and it will calculate your prescription.
Right.
Like literally, it'll look in and look out, and it'll go, this is your prescription.
I saw a demo of that at the Media Lab like 10 years ago, even more than that.
Right.
And they were trying to deploy it to places where they just don't have eye doctors who can do tests like that. But because smartphones are ubiquitous, they can say, well, here is an app that we will prescribe to you, we will give you access to through our health network, and just tell us, and just push this button, and you will have your glasses in like 2 weeks' time, and you won't be able to, you won't have to pay that much money for it.
It would be, if you are a $1.5 trillion company with a couple of $100 billion to spend, prudent to work on all 3 areas. Any breakthrough in any one of those could be another $1 billion business or $10 billion business.
Yeah. The interesting thing for Apple, though, I think, is that they are doing both. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too, in that they keep deploying these interim versions. Like we've been seeing interim AR on the iPhone for a while. We've been seeing interim health on the Apple Watch for a while. And if you take just VR, for example, it's going to take a while to get to mainstream VR. But every rumor suggests that next year or the year after, we're going to get a $3,000 Apple headset with 8K per eye displays, with a custom Apple M3 generation processor to drive it all as fast as a supercomputer, well, not super, but like a beefy tower computer drives VR today. And it'll have all the Apple TV programming that they've spent the last couple of years. People asking, why are they doing that? They'll have Fitness Plus and Apple Entertainment and Apple Gaming and all of this built into it. And it'll be expensive, and it'll be bound to other Apple hardware, the way the first Apple Watch was $700 and bound to iTunes. But then 2, 3, 4 years after that, we'll get closer and closer to the glasses. So I think they're smart in that they try to pay technology off with interim steps along the pipeline.
And if you look at something like with the AR, it's an ecosystem that they're building, and so a lot of we're seeing, oh, why would they put 360 and the ability to manipulate 3D models inside of Motion and Final Cut? I don't know, maybe because those are the authoring packages for what you need to do, that you have control over. You don't have to ask someone to do those things, and so those are the kind of things that they can do, and as that ecosystem gets richer, and I think
make the case. I can see how you could make a ton of money from just non-invasive glucose monitoring, but health. Yeah. If you got even more, you could see you can make a ton of money. I could see how you can make it maybe a little bit less, but a ton of money from making really good self-driving cars. Make a case for why AR could be that lucrative, Alex.
Mark Zuckerberg just did it, Leo. You saw the Meta video.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not going to call. I don't know who I can say and who I can, but a friend of mine, was building some USDZ models and showed them to his sales staff, and they put it on their iPad and showed it to the first client. And the first client got so excited, they were like, "Okay, we have to build everything else that the company makes in 3D in USDZ, because we have to be able to see all these and be able to show it to them." And so the thing is that right now we're in this kind of early stage where everything is hard because it's hard to develop those things. But when you see USDZ working, you go, oh, I can now put this on my, I can put something on my desk and see if that's going to fit, if it's going to look good. I can put furniture in my, those kinds of things. And right now it's very nascent technology. I mean, right now it's barely working. There's little examples of it, and I think Apple's keeping a lot of powder dry because they're not interested in getting everybody else excited about it either. Right. So there's a bunch of us out there just going, until they turn the switch on. Now, the thing is that I've gotten so used to it because I'm now building USDZ models for everything. And everything that I want to do, and what I do is I was doing a presentation for a client last week, and what I did is I put all the objects that I want to talk about in USDZ. I'm in Motion, rendering out those files, but just changing the camera angle. Oh, I really want to show what their product from over here, and so I just rotate it around and hit render and put it into Keynote. Now, eventually, I'm not going to have to hit render and put it into Keynote. I'm just going to have a 3D object in Keynote, rotate it around, and drop it. Or while I'm in the presentation, rotate it around while I'm showing it to them. Or eventually, tap on it, and it shows up on their, on their phone, and they can look at it, in front of themselves. And so, but like for instance, just generating the geometry is a huge lift. If it was just available inside of Pages and Keynote, it would create a gold rush, for building 3D models, because suddenly you're able to now rotate those objects. If I have to do tons and tons of explainer things to clients about how things are going to work. And the idea that I don't have to have a 3D artist, I can just drop it into Keynote, rotate it, and drop it, down, or in Motion. I just did the whole set of animations in Motion with 3D objects. And eventually all of that's going to be something that you can pick up with your phone, and I think that, eventually maybe there's wearables, but even before that, there's a huge ecosystem to build all that geometry and all of those things that it's available right now. I think that it will take the hard part is that what Google never got was critical mass. So they didn't have critical mass of developers. They didn't have critical mass of consumers. They didn't have. Now Apple is slowly rolling LiDAR out to everything, and so it's in the higher end right now. There's going to be some point where LiDAR is just part of every phone that's shipped, and now you have hundreds of millions of consumers ready to use something that you can roll into, and so the glasses are not that important compared to the fact that you can, really get the data, locked down. And really be able to see some amazing experiences. And so it's just getting started. And again, I think Apple is trying to promote it enough to get developers, but not promoted enough to get consumers yet. So I think that they're keeping that powder really dry.
If I could expand on that a little bit, it's not hard to imagine, extrapolate a few years out, where whatever device you have, all it does is handle local authentication and cloud connection to whatever storage you happen to have. And then everything else is handled. It's sort of that dream of multiple endpoints. Everything else is handled by an AR interface, what Apple's calling STAR at the moment. But when you build all these things that Alex is talking about, the ability to understand the environment, that's usable for automation, not just cars, but robots and all sorts of things that are going to get productized over the next 10 years. But also, you need that for any of these interfaces that are coming. It has to understand your environment, and then it starts layering those interfaces in front of you. It doesn't matter if you have a phone or a tablet. It all becomes like opportunistic. You sit down at a desk and it gives you your environment. That's, you see that through your glasses one day, and you don't have to worry about, do I have the latest phone? Do I have the latest tablet? You just have that whole ecosystem nicely filled by all of the USDZ files flying around that you don't even notice anymore. That's just part of the relay system and the subscriptions that you're paying for absolutely everything. But it becomes sort of device agnostic at that point. I think that's the future Apple's shooting towards. It's just going to take multiple steps and multiple years to get there.
And it'll take an enormous amount of investment from Apple. This is where hopefully they learned from iBooks, is that you have to put real money into content development. They're not going to be able to just put this out there. This is what Google was like, okay, we'll put it out there and see what you guys do with it. Nobody did anything. I did something. I was by myself. So anyway, but I think that Apple, if they put the money into it to develop it, it'll go a long way.
I think if I were going to put my money, I'd put it on medical in terms of just raw potential. But there's a lot of headwinds if you're going to do medical. You have to get insurance companies and Medicare and FDA, and it's just complicated. In fact, Apple's already seen that with the Apple Watch. Cars also very complicated because I think the future of private ownership of vehicles even is in doubt. So this is a changing industry.
The Apple fleet.
It's a complicated and changing industry. Plus, Apple doesn't have much existing infrastructure in that industry, or any, to be honest. So I think, even though I'm less excited about AR and what you can do with it, Apple's already there. They've already been building this. They already have the people. And there's nobody to say, no, you can't do that. There's no government agency yet. But I think that it's going to be a lot easier for Apple to penetrate that market. So I think there's more money probably in healthcare than any of the above. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy to pluck that.
Yeah,
aging population.
That's absolutely right. There's also another category we haven't talked about, which is finance. That
that's also easy for Apple if they can just get into it. Yeah.
If they really were to light a fire underneath what they're doing with Apple Pay and the Apple Card, and they decided that we have a lot of there are a lot of problems with investing with cash, with moving money from one country to another. Like if part of your family is across a border, there are a lot of problems that we're in a very good position to solve. And parenthetically, to shareholders, they say it's really, really good if people give us their money and we just hold on to it for a while until they tell us what they want to do with it. Yeah. So that's another opportunity for them.
There's a few people made money on PayPal, right? I think there's a few people who came out of PayPal.
And one of them owns his own Starfleet.
Right.
Well, and
that's a possibility too. Yeah.
I mean, Apple is like two inches away from being a bank.
Right.
Like they were like.
I think it's Zeno's paradox all over again. It's those last 2 inches.
It is. But if they pulled it out, I mean, between Apple Cash and the Apple credit card, and then all the things you buy, you get to a point where you're just buying stuff from Apple with the card that Apple gave you. That, the thing it's pretty efficient. Is
Microsoft still worth more than Apple now? I briefly last week.
I think they're still number one. I think that in terms of valuation, Apple is still underneath Microsoft by one click. Maybe
they're not subject to vague tweets from to tweet polls from their CEO as much as other companies are.
Who would have thought that? I mean, that 20 years ago, Microsoft was. I remember Dvorak always saying, "Well, whose wallet would you want, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs?" But that completely flipped.
Turns out Bezos and Musk, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, that's the thing that we keep forgetting. It's like inside of Microsoft, they're saying, you know what? You can have all of the columnists, all the commentators saying how innovative Apple is. You can say about how Elon Musk is redefining an entire category of transportation. Will be the gears that power every single business that needs to build cars and that needs to build everything else. It's a good place to be if you're interested in making money. It's not sexy. It's not proud. We still can't make a folding phone worth a damn. But hey, we got enough cash that we can float the Surface, the Android Surface tablet for a while.
Microsoft's market cap is $2.53 trillion compared to Apple's $2.468 trillion as of this recording. So Microsoft is.
Leo, we live in a world where Tim Cook is worth like $1.2 billion and Kendall Jenner is worth $45 billion.
I know.
And none of this means anything anymore.
Even Paris Hilton's worth more than Tim Cook, and that's really a shame.